Hey, welcome back to English in Fluency. I'm Alex, and I am really happy you clicked on this video today. Before we start, I want you to try something. Say the word really out loud right now, the way you just heard me say it twice. Did your voice go up a little? Did it get a bit slower the second time? That tiny change, that little rise and fall in your voice, that's the whole topic of today's lesson. And honestly, it might be the single most important skill you can build if you want to actually understand native speakers in real life, not just in a textbook. Here's the problem most English learners run into. You study grammar for years. You memorize thousands of words. You can read a newspaper article and understand almost everything. But then you watch a movie, or you listen to two friends chatting in a coffee shop, and suddenly you feel lost. Not because the words are too hard. Most of the time, the words are simple. The problem is the music behind the words, the rising and falling of the voice, the stress on certain syllables, the little pauses that carry feeling. We call this intonation, and English speakers use it constantly, almost without thinking, to show emotion, to ask questions, to be sarcastic, to comfort someone, to argue, to flirt, to warn. If you can't hear that music, you miss half the message, even when you understand every single word. Maybe this has happened to you already. Someone says, "Fine," and you take it at face value, only to find out later that something was clearly wrong, and everyone else in the room seemed to know it instantly, just from the sound of that one little word. Or maybe a joke flew right past you, because the words looked serious on the surface, but the tone underneath was actually light and playful the whole time. That gap between what the words say and what the voice means is exactly where this lesson is going to live today. So today, instead of just giving you a list of rules, I want to tell you a story. It's a simple story about two old friends meeting again after many years apart. As the story moves along, I'll stop here and there, point things out, and ask you to repeat certain lines out loud, copying the rhythm and the feeling in the voice. This is exactly how I want you to listen, with your whole body relaxed, your ears open, not worrying about grammar at all, just feeling the shape of the sentences. By the end of this video, you'll start noticing intonation patterns everywhere, in songs, in interviews, in everyday conversations. And trust me, once you start hearing it, you can't stop. It's like learning to see colors you never noticed before. Let me introduce you to our two characters. Her name is Mira. She grew up in a small town, moved away for university, built a career in another city, and after almost 10 years, she's finally come back home for a short visit. The other person is Jordan, her childhood neighbor and best friend from school. They used to spend every single summer together, riding bikes, getting into small trouble, telling each other secrets. Then life happened. They drifted apart the way old friends sometimes do, and they haven't really talked in years, just a few short messages here and there. Today, almost by accident, they're about to reconnect. It starts with a phone call. Mira is sitting in her childhood bedroom, looking through old photographs, when her phone rings. She doesn't recognize the number at first, but she picks up anyway. "Hello," she says, and notice how her voice rises a little at the end, because she's unsure who's calling. That small upward movement at the end of a word or a short sentence is one of the most common intonation patterns in English. We use it naturally when we're uncertain, when we're checking something, when we want to sound polite and open rather than closed and final. Try saying hello the way Mira does, with that gentle lift at the end, like you're leaving a little door open for the other person to answer. Now compare that to a flat, falling hello, the kind you might use when you already know exactly who's calling and you're not particularly excited about it. Same word, completely different feeling, and the only thing that changed was the direction of your voice. There's another classic example I want to plant in your mind before we go back to the story, because once you hear it, you'll never forget it. Take the sentence, "I didn't say she took the money." 6 simple words, nothing complicated at all. But watch what happens when we move the stress from one word to another. Say it with stress on I. "I didn't say she took the money." And suddenly, the meaning becomes, someone else said it, not me. Now say it with stress on say. "I didn't say she took the money." And the meaning shifts again. Maybe I only thought it or wrote it, but I never actually spoke it out loud. Now put the stress on she. "I didn't say she took the money." And now the meaning becomes, maybe someone else took it, not her. Move the stress to took. "I didn't say she took the money." And now it sounds like maybe she borrowed it, or found it, but didn't steal it exactly. And finally, stress on money. "I didn't say she took the money." And now it sounds like maybe she took something else entirely, just not the money. 6 words, 5 completely different hidden meanings, and not one single word actually changed. Only the music moved. This is exactly why I keep telling you that listening to English is so much more than recognizing vocabulary. The real message often lives inside the stress, hiding in plain sight, waiting for a trained ear to catch it. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice says, "Mira, is that really you?" Listen to how much weight falls on the word really there. Jordan isn't just asking a simple question. He's expressing surprise, maybe even a little disbelief, like he can hardly trust his own ears. If he said it flatly, "Is that you?" it would sound almost bored, almost like he expected the call. But by stretching out really and pushing his voice up higher on that word, he's telling Mira, without even saying it directly, that this moment matters to him, that hearing her voice again is a genuinely big deal. This is where I want you to pause the video for a second, if you can, and say this sentence out loud, copying that same energy. "Is that really you?" Don't just read the words. Feel the surprise. Let your voice climb up on really, like you're genuinely shocked and delighted at the same time. Say it again, a little stronger this time. Good. That's emphasis, and emphasis is simply choosing one word in a sentence to carry more energy, more height, more length, because that word holds the real emotional center of what you're saying. Mira laughs, a little breathless, and says, "Jordan! Oh my goodness! It's been forever!" Notice the exclamation in her voice on his name. When we're excited to hear from someone, we often say their name with a quick rise, almost like a small burst of joy, escaping before the rest of the sentence even starts. Compare that to someone saying a name flatly, almost like a label, Jordan, with no real feeling attached. The first version tells you immediately, before any other words are even spoken, that this person is happy. The second version tells you nothing at all about feeling. This is exactly why, in real conversations, you should always listen to how a name or a greeting is said before you even process the rest of the sentence, because that first little sound often tells you the emotional temperature of the whole exchange. They talk for a few minutes, catching up, and Jordan finally says, "You have to come by the old cafe this weekend, the one on Maple Street. Remember?" Here's something interesting. The first part of that sentence, "You have to come by the old cafe this weekend," has a fairly normal falling pattern because it's a statement, almost like a gentle order wrapped in friendliness. But remember, at the end rises sharply because it's a real question, a genuine check to see if she still remembers that place. If Jordan had said "remember" with a falling tone instead, it would sound less like a question and more like he was simply telling her to remember, almost like a command. The rising tone softens it, makes it sound curious and warm rather than demanding. Try this short exercise with me. Say the full sentence. "You have to come by the old cafe this weekend, remember?" Let your voice stay fairly even and natural through the first part. Then lift clearly on that final word. Try it 2 or 3 times. Notice how the rising "remember" makes the whole sentence feel like an invitation between friends, not an order from a boss. Mira agrees, a little nervous but excited, and says, "Okay, I'll be there." Short sentences like this usually fall at the end, especially when someone is making a decision or a promise. The falling tone here gives a sense of certainty, of commitment. If she instead said, "I'll be there," with a rising tone, it would suddenly sound unsure, like she was asking herself if that was even possible. Maybe checking her own schedule out loud. Same 3 words, 2 completely different meanings, and the only difference is which direction her voice travels at the end. Now, let's jump forward to Saturday afternoon. Mira walks into the small cafe on Maple Street. The bell above the door rings, and she spots Jordan sitting at their old favorite table by the window. He stands up, smiling so wide it looks like his face might break, and says, "Well, well, well, look who finally showed up." I want you to notice something important here. The words alone, if you just read them on paper, could sound a little harsh, even sarcastic in a negative way, like he's annoyed she's been gone so long. But the tone he actually uses, playful, warm, slightly teasing, with a light singing quality rising and falling through the sentence, completely changes the meaning. It becomes friendly teasing, the kind close friends do to show affection, not criticism. This is one of the biggest lessons about intonation that I want you to take away from this whole video. The same exact words can carry opposite meanings depending on tone alone. Written English and spoken English are not the same animal. If you only ever read English, you might misunderstand sarcasm, teasing, sincerity, and emotion constantly, because on paper, those things often look identical. The voice is what separates a joke from an insult, a compliment from a complaint, sincerity from sarcasm. Let's practice that exact sentence together. Say, "Well, well, well, look who finally showed up," but make it warm and playful, like you're genuinely delighted to see an old friend who's a little bit late. Let your pitch bounce gently on each "well," almost musically. Now, just so you can hear the contrast, try saying the exact same sentence, but flat and cold, almost annoyed, like you're genuinely frustrated someone kept you waiting for hours. Notice how different those 2 versions feel in your own mouth, even though every single word is exactly the same. Mira laughs and sits down across from him. I know. I'm sorry. Traffic was crazy, she says. People often repeat a phrase like, I know, quickly, with a falling, slightly apologetic tone, almost rushing through it, because they're acknowledging fault without wanting to dwell on it too long. If she said it slowly and seriously, I know, I know, with long pauses, it might sound like deep regret over something much more serious than just being a little late. Speed and rhythm matter just as much as pitch when we're figuring out how someone really feels. Jordan waves his hand dismissively and says, Don't worry about it. Sit, order something. My treat. Here, the falling tone on Don't worry about it shows genuine reassurance, a calm closing down of the topic, like he's truly not bothered. If instead he said it sharply, Don't worry about it, with stress hitting hard on worry, it could actually sound passive-aggressive, like he secretly is a little bothered, but is pretending not to be. Isn't that fascinating? The exact same four words can either fully comfort someone or quietly insult them, and the only signal telling you which one is happening is the music in the voice. A server walks over and Mira orders a coffee. The server asks, For here or to go? That phrase usually has a rise on the second option, to go, because it's offering a clear choice between two things, and English speakers tend to lift their pitch slightly higher on the final option in a list, especially in a question like this. Try saying it yourself. For here or to go? Let your voice rise just a bit higher on go than it did on here. This pattern shows up constantly in English, whenever someone is offering choices. Do you want tea, coffee, or juice? Each item gets its own little rise, building up until the very last one often gets the highest lift, like a small musical climb. Before we move forward, I want to slip in one more very common pattern you'll hear constantly in everyday English, something called a question tag. Those little add-ons at the end of a sentence like, isn't it, don't you, or right. These tiny tags can rise or fall, and the direction completely changes what the speaker actually means. While they're finishing their coffee, Jordan glances out the window and says, It's a beautiful evening, isn't it? With isn't it rising clearly at the end. That rising tag means he genuinely doesn't know for certain and is truly asking, inviting her opinion, even though deep down he probably already agrees with himself. Now imagine he said the exact same words, but let isn't it fall instead of rise, flat and confident. In that case, he wouldn't really be asking at all. He'd already be sure, and the tag would just be a soft, friendly way of inviting her to agree with something he already believes. Almost like saying right with total confidence, rather than genuine curiosity. Try both versions yourself right now. First, say, It's a beautiful evening, isn't it? With real curiosity, letting isn't it climb upward, like you genuinely want to know what she thinks. Then say the same sentence again, but this time let isn't it fall, calm and certain, like you're simply sharing an opinion you're confident she'll agree with. Feel how the very same four words at the end can either open a real question or simply close a friendly statement, depending only on which way your voice travels. You'll hear this pattern constantly once you start listening for it, in phrases like, You're coming tomorrow, aren't you? That was amazing, wasn't it? Or, You don't mind, do you? Each time, ask yourself, did the tag rise, meaning the speaker truly wants information, or did it fall, meaning the speaker is fairly sure already and just wants gentle agreement. This single habit, just noticing the direction of that little tag at the end, will make a noticeable difference in how naturally you understand casual English conversation. After the server leaves, the conversation turns a little more serious. Jordan looks at Mira and asks, "So, are you happy? Really happy? I mean, not just busy." This is such an important example because it shows how emphasis can completely shift the depth of a question. The first time he says happy, it's a fairly normal question. But then he adds really happy, stressing really heavily, almost slowing down on it. And that single word transforms the question from small talk into something genuinely caring and concerned. He's telling her, through his tone alone, that he wants an honest answer, not a polite one. Mira pauses for a second, and when she answers, her voice does something very human. She says, "I'm fine." But the word fine doesn't fall the way a confident, truly fine person's voice usually falls. Instead, it sort of trails off, slightly higher than expected, a little shaky, almost unfinished. This is a perfect, very real example of how tone can completely contradict the actual words being spoken. The word says, fine. The voice says, not really. If you only read the transcript of this conversation, you would think everything is okay. But if you listen carefully to the rise and the shake and the slowness in her voice, you understand the truth underneath the surface. I really want you to sit with this idea for a moment, because it's one of the most useful listening skills you can develop in English, or, honestly, in any language. Native speakers, and people in general, often say one thing with their words, while their tone says something completely different. Sarcasm works this way. Politeness works this way. Hidden sadness works this way. Hidden anger works this way, too. If you train your ear to listen past the dictionary meaning of words and start paying attention to pitch, speed, pauses, and stress, you will understand people on a much deeper level, and you'll catch emotional signals that a simple translation could never give you. Let's practice this contrast directly. First, say, "I'm fine," the confident way. Short, clear, falling firmly at the end, like everything truly is okay. Now say, "I'm fine," the uncertain way. Let the word fine rise slightly. Stretch a little. Maybe even shake, just a touch, like you're trying to convince yourself as much as the other person. Feel that difference in your own chest as you say it. That physical feeling, that's exactly what you should be listening for in others. Jordan notices immediately, because of course he does. They've known each other since childhood. He leans forward slightly and says, softly this time, much softer than before, "Hey, you don't have to say fine if it's not true." Notice how his pitch drops here, how his pace slows down. When people want to comfort someone or create a safe, gentle moment, they very often lower their pitch and slow their speech. Loud, fast, high-pitched speech rarely feels comforting. Soft, slow, lower-pitched speech almost always does. This is true across so many languages and cultures, and English is no exception. Try saying his line that way. "Hey, you don't have to say fine if it's not true." Make your voice quiet, gentle, unhurried. Let there be a small pause after "hey," like you're carefully opening a door rather than bursting through it. This is the sound of comfort in English, and once you can recognize it, you'll immediately know when someone in a show or a real conversation is trying to be kind and supportive, even before you fully process every word they're saying. You'll hear this same gentle, slow, low pattern again and again, in hospital waiting rooms, in late-night phone calls between worried friends, in quiet moments between parents and children. Because comfort, it turns out, has a remarkably consistent sound across so many different situations. Mira's eyes get a little watery, and she finally tells the truth. "My dad's been sick," she says, her voice flat and heavy, each word landing slowly, almost like stones dropping one by one. "It's been a hard year." Notice there's no rising energy here at all. No bounce, no lift. Sad or heavy emotional content in English very often comes out in a low, even, falling pattern, sometimes almost monotone, because strong sadness tends to drain the natural musicality out of speech. This is actually a really useful listening clue. When someone's voice suddenly becomes flatter and slower than usual, even if their words seem fairly normal, it's often a sign that something difficult is sitting underneath what they're saying. Let's practice that line together. Gently. Say, "My dad's been sick. It's been a hard year." Let your pace slow down. Let your pitch stay low and even, without much rise or fall at all. Don't perform big sadness, just let the words come out plain and a little heavy. The way real people often sound when they're being honest about something painful. This kind of flat, slow delivery is completely different from excitement or anger, and learning to recognize it will help you understand emotional scenes in movies, podcasts, and real conversations so much more clearly. Jordan reaches across the table and rests his hand near hers, not quite touching, and says quietly, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." The word "so" gets a noticeable stretch and a soft rise here, almost like a sigh built into the language itself. We often stretch small words like "so," "really," or "very" when we want to add emotional weight without raising our volume. It's a gentle kind of emphasis, completely different from the loud, sharp emphasis you might use when you're excited or surprised. Try saying it, "I'm so sorry," and really let that "so" stretch out, soft and warm, like a small wave of sympathy. They sit quietly for a moment, and then Mira takes a breath and says, "Anyway, enough about that. Tell me about you. What's new?" Listen to how "anyway" is often said quickly, with a falling tone, almost like a door closing gently on a topic someone isn't ready to keep discussing. This is such a common pattern in real English conversation. People use short, fast, falling words like "anyway," "well," or "so" to signal a shift in topic, almost like a verbal hand gesture, pushing one subject aside to make room for another. Jordan, picking up on her need to lighten the mood, brightens his voice on purpose and says, "Oh, well, you're not going to believe this, but I actually started my own little bakery." Here's a wonderful example of excitement and pride mixed together. Notice the rise in energy on "you're not going to believe this," almost teasing, building anticipation, like he's setting up a small surprise reveal. Then, "my own little bakery" comes out with real warmth and a touch of pride, slightly slower, like he wants her to really absorb the news. Try this one with energy. Say, "You're not going to believe this, but I actually started my own little bakery." Let the first half build up, almost playful, like you're holding a secret just a little longer before letting it out. Then, let "my own little bakery" land with warmth and pride, maybe even a small smile in your voice, the kind of smile that listeners can actually hear, even if they can't see your face. Mira's whole face lights up, and she practically shouts, "Wait, what? Since when? Jordan, that's amazing!" This burst of reaction is full of short, high, quick rises. "Wait, what?" jumps upward fast, showing genuine shock. "Since when?" Rises to a real question demanding information immediately. And "that's amazing" gets heavy stress right on the word amazing, stretched and lifted, because that's the emotional peak of the whole sentence. The word that carries all her excitement and pride for her old friend. Let's practice the whole burst together. With real energy this time, don't be shy. Say, "Wait, what? Since when? Jordan? That's amazing." Let each question jump up quickly, almost overlapping with excitement, and really push the stress hard onto amazing at the end, stretching it out, letting your pitch climb. This is what genuine, joyful surprise sounds like in English, fast, high, and full of energy, completely different from the slow, low, flat sadness we practiced just a few minutes ago. Hearing the contrast between these two emotional patterns side by side is exactly how your ear starts to build a map of English emotional sound. Jordan laughs, clearly enjoying her reaction, and tells her the whole story. How he lost his old office job 2 years ago, how scared he was at first, how he slowly built up the courage to open a tiny bakery with money he'd saved for years. As he talks about the scary parts, his voice naturally slows and drops a little, the way ours often does when we're remembering something difficult. But every time he mentions something he's proud of, his pitch lifts again, like little hills rising out of a flatter landscape. This rising and falling throughout a longer story is incredibly normal and natural. And once you notice it, you'll realize that almost nobody talks in one flat tone for very long, unless they're trying very hard to hide their feelings or unless something is seriously wrong. At one point, Jordan says, "Honestly, there were nights I almost gave up." The word honestly here gets its own little rise, almost like he's checking whether she's really ready to hear something true and a bit vulnerable before he commits to saying it. We often use words like honestly, actually, or to be fair as small emotional doorways, said with a slight lift, right before we share something more personal or more surprising than what came before. Try saying, "Honestly, there were nights I almost gave up," with that little rise on honestly, almost like a question to himself. And then let the rest of the sentence fall, heavier, more serious. Mira reaches over now, finally letting her hand rest gently on his arm, and says, "But you didn't. Look at you now." Short sentences again, and again that confident falling tone, because she's stating something she clearly believes, not asking or wondering. "Look at you now" especially carries warmth through stress on you, like she's truly looking at him, truly seeing him, proud of who he's become. Try saying it slowly. "But you didn't. Look at you now." Let your voice fall with quiet confidence on both short sentences, and let real warmth sit underneath the word you. As the afternoon turns into evening, their conversation moves easily between laughter and memory, the way old friendships often do once the first awkwardness melts away. At one point, Jordan teases her about an old embarrassing story from school, saying, "Oh, come on. You cannot tell me you forgot about the time you fell into the river chasing that dog." Listen to how "oh, come on" rises immediately, almost theatrical, a classic sound of friendly disbelief or playful protest. Then, "you cannot tell me" gets heavier stress on cannot, almost stretched, because he's emphasizing how impossible it would be for her to forget something so memorable. Practice this one with a playful, teasing energy. Say, "Oh, come on. You cannot tell me you forgot about the time you fell into the river chasing that dog. Let, oh, come on, burst upward quickly, light and joking. Then slow down slightly on cannot, really leaning into that word, almost rolling your eyes as you say it, the way you might with a close friend you're gently teasing. Mira groans and covers her face, laughing, and says, "Don't remind me. I still think about that dog sometimes." The word "don't" here often gets quick, sharp stress, almost a small protest, before the rest of the sentence settles into a softer, amused tone. Try it. Don't remind me, with a little punch on don't. Then, I still think about that dog sometimes, said more gently, with a small smile hiding in the words. The kind of embarrassed affection people show when they're laughing at their own past mistakes. As the light outside starts to turn golden, signaling early evening, Jordan grows a little quieter again and says, "You know, I missed this, just talking like this, with you." There's something beautifully simple about how this line is usually said. "You know" often comes with a soft, falling, almost thoughtful tone, like someone gathering their feelings before speaking them. Then, "I missed this" carries gentle weight on missed, stretched slightly, sincere, not dramatic, just quietly true. Let's practice that together. Say, "You know, I missed this, just talking like this, with you." Let your pace slow down naturally. Don't rush. Let missed carry a small, honest stretch, and let the whole sentence fall gently, the way sincere, quiet confessions usually do in English, completely different from loud excitement or sharp sarcasm. This soft, sincere tone is one you'll hear constantly in real conversations between people who trust each other, and recognizing it will help you understand the emotional truth in countless movies, shows, and everyday talks. Mira smiles, a little shy now, and answers, "Me too. I didn't realize how much until right now." Notice the small pause she takes before "until right now," almost like she's surprising herself with how true that sentence feels as she says it out loud. Pauses, by the way, are just as important as pitch when it comes to intonation and emotional meaning. A pause in the right place can show hesitation, thoughtfulness, surprise, or even emotional weight too heavy to rush through. Try saying her line with a small pause. "Me too. I didn't realize how much until right now." Let that pause breathe a little, like she's discovering her own feelings in real time. Now, before we keep following Mira and Jordan toward the end of their afternoon, I want to stop for a moment and gather together everything we've practiced so far, because this is exactly the kind of summary your ear needs to lock these patterns into memory. We've seen how questions often rise at the end, especially yes or no questions and gentle checks like, "Remember?" We've seen how statements and confident decisions usually fall, giving a sense of certainty and closure. We've seen how stretching a word like "really," "so," or "honestly" adds emotional weight without necessarily raising volume. We've seen how sarcasm and teasing rely completely on a playful, musical tone, because the exact same word said flatly would sound rude or even cruel. We've seen how sadness tends to flatten and slow the voice, draining away the natural rise and fall, while excitement does the opposite, pushing pitch higher and speeding up the rhythm. And we've seen how comfort and sincerity usually come wrapped in a slower pace and a softer, lower pitch, almost like a gentle hand placed on someone's shoulder through sound alone. Let's keep going with the story, because there's a really important scene coming up that will test everything you've just learned, all at once, in a slightly more complicated, more emotional moment. As evening settles in, Jordan's phone buzzes on the table. He glances at it, and his expression shifts slightly. "Sorry, I have to take this," he says, his tone polite but a little tense, the word sorry quick and slightly clipped, not the slow, warm sorry we heard earlier when he was comforting her about her father. This is a great example of how the exact same word, sorry, can carry completely different emotional textures depending on context, speed, and pitch. Earlier, "I'm so sorry," was slow, warm, stretched, full of sympathy. This time, "Sorry, I have to take this," is fast, clipped, slightly distracted, showing politeness mixed with mild urgency rather than deep emotion. He steps just outside the cafe to take the call, and through the window, Mira watches his expression change as he listens. When he comes back inside a few minutes later, his energy feels different, heavier somehow. He sits down and says, "That was my landlord. The bakery's lease might not get renewed." Listen to how flat and clipped this sentence sounds, almost businesslike, because he's still processing the news himself, not yet fully reacting emotionally. Sometimes, right after receiving difficult news, people's voices actually go quite flat and controlled for a moment, almost like a kind of shock, before the real emotional reaction catches up a few seconds later. Try saying it that way. "That was my landlord. The bakery's lease might not get renewed." Keep your tone fairly even, slightly tense underneath, but controlled, not yet fully emotional. This flat, careful tone right after bad news is actually a really useful pattern to recognize, because it often signals someone trying to stay calm on the surface while something difficult is happening underneath. Mira leans forward immediately, concern flooding her voice. "Wait, what? After everything you've built?" "Here. Wait. What?" rises sharply again, the universal sound of shocked concern, almost identical in shape to her earlier excited, "Wait, what?" But the emotional color underneath is completely different, worried rather than joyful. This is such an important point. The same intonation pattern, a fast-rising, "Wait, what?" can signal either delighted surprise or worried alarm. And the only way to tell the difference is by everything else happening around it. The situation, the facial expression, if you can see it, and the slightly different quality of tension in the voice itself. Practice both versions back to back, because the contrast will really help train your ear. First, say, "Wait, what?" the excited way, light, bright, almost giggling. Then say, "Wait, what?" the worried way, a little tighter, faster, with tension instead of lightness underneath the same rising shape. Feel how your face and your chest actually change between these two versions, even though the words and even the basic up and down shape are nearly identical. Jordan rubs his face with both hands and admits, "I don't know what I'm going to do." Notice how slowly and heavily this comes out, each word landing with weight, the pace dragging compared to his earlier energetic storytelling about starting the bakery. When people feel genuinely overwhelmed or lost, their speech often slows dramatically, almost like their words are struggling against some invisible resistance. Try saying it that way. "I don't know what I'm going to do," with a small pause in the middle, letting the heaviness sit in the silence as much as in the words themselves. Mira doesn't rush to fill the silence right away. After a moment, she says, gently but firmly, "Okay, let's think about this together." This is a beautiful example of supportive intonation. Okay, falls calmly, almost like steadying ground beneath shaky feet. Let's think about this together. Carries warm, even stress across several words, especially together, which gets a small lift and stretch, reassuring him that he's not facing this alone. Try saying it. Okay, let's think about this together. Nice and steady, calm but warm, like someone offering a hand rather than panicking alongside him. Over the next stretch of conversation, the two of them talk through possibilities, and you can hear Jordan's tone slowly shifting, the heaviness lifting bit by bit as Mira asks practical questions and offers ideas. At one point she asks, "Have you talked to him about a payment plan? Or maybe a short extension?" This kind of practical problem-solving question usually has a fairly gentle rising tone at the end, since it's a real, open question inviting information. But it stays calm and steady throughout, not panicked, because she's trying to create a sense of solvable structure around his problem, rather than adding more anxiety to it. Jordan considers this and says, slowly at first, then with a touch more energy as the idea takes hold, "Actually, no, I haven't even asked. I just assumed it was final." Watch how "actually" rises slightly here too, just like "honestly" did earlier, signaling a small shift in his own thinking, a tiny door opening onto a new possibility he hadn't considered before. Then his pace picks up just slightly, as hope creeps back in. "I haven't even asked," each word a little clearer, like his mind is waking back up from the shock. By the time the evening light has faded into a soft blue outside the cafe windows, the heaviness from earlier has lifted into something more like determination, though not before one small bump in the road that I think is actually really useful for us to study closely. At one point, eager to help, Mira says, "Just give me his number. I'll call him myself and sort this out." She says it quickly, confidently, maybe a little too confidently, the stress landing hard and fast on myself, almost like she's already decided this is the right move before even asking if Jordan wants that kind of help. Jordan's face tightens slightly, and his next words come out sharper than before, the pace speeding up, the pitch climbing higher than his usual calm tone. "No, Mira, I can handle my own business," he says, and listen closely to how different this sounds from anything we've heard from him so far today. The word "no" snaps out short and hard, almost cutting the air. "My own business" gets heavy, clipped stress on both "own" and "business," each word landing like a small, firm step, the classic sound of someone feeling crowded or talked over, even by a person who genuinely means well. This is what frustration and mild anger often sound like in English. Faster pace, sharper edges on certain words, less smooth rising and falling and more sudden, almost stabbing emphasis, like the voice is pushing back against something rather than flowing gently with it. It's a very different texture from the flat heaviness of sadness we practiced earlier, and a very different texture from the bright, bouncy energy of excitement, too. Anger and frustration tend to feel tight and quick, where sadness feels loose and slow, and excitement feels light and quick. Try saying his line yourself, with that same tightness. "No, Mira, I can handle my own business." Let "no" snap out fast. Let "own business" land firm and clipped, almost defensive. Mira blinks, a little stung, and for a second, neither of them says anything. Then she says, more quietly now, "Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to take over." Notice how quickly her energy drops here too, the apology coming out soft, and a little uncertain. Sorry. Almost shrinking in size compared to how confident she sounded just a moment earlier. When people realize they've overstepped, their voice often deflates rapidly like this, losing height and volume almost instantly, a kind of vocal retreat. Try saying it. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to take over. Softer, smaller, genuinely a little embarrassed. Jordan sighs, the tightness slowly draining out of his voice as he runs a hand through his hair. No, it's me, I'm sorry, he says, and this sorry sounds completely different from her quick one, slower, heavier, more drawn out. A real apology rather than a quick reflex. I know you're just trying to help. I guess I'm just scared, and it's easier to be annoyed than scared. That small pause before scared carries real weight, the sound of someone admitting something a little uncomfortable about themselves. The pitch dropping low and honest right on that final word. This whole little exchange, by the way, happening in less than a minute of real conversation, moves through at least 3 completely different emotional tones. Confident and a little pushy, sharp and defensive, soft and apologetic, then slow and vulnerably honest. Real conversations between real people shift like this constantly, sometimes within a single sentence. And that's actually wonderful news for you as a learner, because it means there's no single trick or single pattern to memorize. Instead, you're training a kind of flexible, responsive listening, the ability to notice shifts as they happen, moment to moment, rather than expecting one flat emotional tone to last through an entire conversation. Mira reaches over, her voice warm again now, and says, "You don't have to be brave all the time, you know. Not with me." The word brave gets a gentle stretch here, sympathetic rather than admiring, and not with me falls softly at the end, simple and reassuring, closing the small gap that opened between them just moments before. Try saying it slowly. You don't have to be brave all the time, you know. Not with me. Nice and warm, letting the earlier tension fully dissolve in your voice as you say it. And just like that, the small storm passes, the way small storms often do between people who truly trust each other, and the conversation settles back into the easier, gentler rhythm it had before. The kind of rhythm that only exists between people who have known each other long enough to weather a few small storms and still come back to warmth. A little while later, Jordan looks at Mira and says, with real warmth returning fully to his voice, "Thank you. I mean it. I don't think I could have talked through this with anyone else the same way." The word thank you here is slow and sincere, stretched gently, completely different from a quick, polite thanks you might say to a stranger holding a door open for you. "I mean it" gets firm, falling stress, a clear statement of sincerity, almost like he's making sure she understands he's not just being polite. Practice this together one more time. Say, "Thank you. I mean it." Let "thank you" stretch a little, warm and slow. Then let "I mean it" fall with quiet conviction, steady, sincere, no rush at all. This is the sound of real gratitude in English, slower and warmer than a quick social thanks. And learning to hear that difference will help you immediately sense when someone truly means their thank you versus when they're simply being polite out of habit. Mira smiles softly and says, "That's what friends are for." A simple, common phrase, usually said with a gentle, easy-falling tone, light and natural, almost like she's brushing off the weight of his thanks because, to her, helping him is the most normal thing in the world. not something requiring a big reaction. As they get up to leave, the bell above the door ringing again as they step outside into the cool evening air, Jordan turns to her and asks, almost shyly, "Will you actually stay around for a while this time? Or is this another quick visit?" Notice the slight hesitation in "actually" and the gentle, hopeful rise at the end of the whole question, especially noticeable on "this time," like he's bracing himself a little for disappointment, but still allowing himself to hope. Mira pauses, looking at him for a long moment, and then says, "I think I might. There's nothing pulling me back there anymore, not really." The pause before "I might" carries real emotional weight, the sound of someone genuinely considering a decision rather than reciting a rehearsed answer. "Not really" at the end falls softly, almost trailing off, gentle and a little wistful, like she's letting go of an old life as she says it. This moment, by the way, is a wonderful, natural place for us to practice something called thought groups, which is just a fancy way of saying that long sentences in English aren't said all in one breath with the same energy throughout. Instead, we break them into smaller chunks, each chunk often having its own little rise or fall, with small pauses between them, almost like beads on a string, rather than one solid block of sound. Listen again to how Mira's sentence breaks apart. "I think," small pause. "I might," small pause. "There's nothing pulling me back there anymore," slight continued energy. Then, "not really," fallen and trailing off at the very end. If you tried to say this whole sentence in one flat rush with no pauses and no shifting energy, it would sound robotic and strange, even if every single word was pronounced perfectly. Try saying her full line slowly, chunk by chunk. "I think I might. There's nothing pulling me back there anymore. Not really." Let each little pause breathe naturally. Let your pitch shift gently between the pieces. This chunking pattern, by the way, is incredibly useful for you as a learner, because once you start noticing it, long English sentences stop feeling like overwhelming walls of sound and start feeling like manageable little pieces strung together, each one with its own small emotional shape. Jordan grins, real happiness spreading across his face, and says, "Good, because honestly, this town's been kind of boring without you." The teasing return of "honestly" here carries a playful little lift again. Light and warm rather than heavy and serious like it was earlier in the conversation, showing once more how the very same word can shift its emotional flavor depending entirely on the tone wrapped around it. They start walking down the street together, the way old friends do when they've found their rhythm again. And as the scene fades into the evening, I want to bring us back out of the story for a moment, because there's one more really important piece of this puzzle I want to make sure you walk away with today. Everything we've practiced together, the rising questions, the falling statements, the stretched emphasis on emotional words, the flat, heavy sadness, the bright, quick excitement, the soft, slow comfort. None of this is something you can master just by reading about it once. Your ear and your mouth need real, repeated practice, the same way your body needs repeated movement to learn a new physical skill like swimming or riding a bike. So here's what I want you to do. After this video ends, find a short clip of natural English conversation. It could be from a podcast, a show, an interview, anything where real people are actually talking, not reading from a script in a flat news anchor voice. Listen to just one sentence at a time. Try to copy, not only the words, but the exact rise and fall, the exact pauses, the exact stretched or stressed syllables. Record yourself if you can, and compare it to the original. This is called shadowing, and it is honestly one of the most powerful tools available for improving both your listening and your speaking at the same time, because it forces your brain to process meaning and music together, the same way native speakers do automatically. I also want you to start a small habit of noticing intonation in your daily life, even outside of English study. Listen to people speaking in your own language too, and notice how their voice rises when they're asking something, falls when they're certain, stretches when they're emotional, flattens when they're sad, speeds up when they're excited. Once you realize that intonation isn't some strange, mysterious, English-only phenomenon, but something deeply human that exists in every language, just with slightly different specific patterns, it becomes much less intimidating and much more like something you already understand on a deep, instinctive level, just waiting to be transferred over into your English listening and speaking. A simple way to build this habit is to pick one short scene each day, maybe 30 seconds long, no more, and listen to it 3 separate times. The first time, just close your eyes and listen for the overall feeling, happy, sad, nervous, joking, without worrying about a single word. The second time, listen specifically for where the voice rises and where it falls, maybe even tracing the shape in the air with your hand, like a small invisible wave moving up and down. The third time, try speaking along quietly, almost like a whisper at first, if that feels more comfortable, matching the rhythm and the music as closely as you can. 30 seconds a day, repeated like this, adds up far more than people expect, because you're not just collecting new words, you're rewiring your ear to catch signals it used to miss completely. Let's go back to Mira and Jordan one final time, just for a short closing moment, because I think it ties everything together nicely. A few days later, after Mira has decided to stay in town a little longer than planned, she stops by the bakery early one morning before it opens. Jordan is inside, flour on his hands, music playing quietly. He looks up, surprised, and says, "Well, look who's up early." That same playful, musical well returns, light and warm, immediately recognizable now after everything we've practiced. Mira smiles and holds up 2 coffee cups. "I figured you could use this," she says, her tone easy and casual, the kind of relaxed, gentle falling tone that signals comfortable familiarity between 2 people who no longer feel any need to perform politeness with each other, just simple, easy warmth. Jordan takes the cup, takes a sip, and sighs happily. "Perfect," he says, just one word, but stretched slightly, warm, satisfied, a small sound of contentment that somehow carries an entire feeling in a single syllable. They stand together by the window as the morning light spreads across the empty tables, and Jordan says quietly, almost to himself, "I have a feeling this year's going to be different." The phrase, "I have a feeling," often carries a gentle, thoughtful rise and fall, almost like someone testing an idea out loud for the first time, unsure but hopeful. This year's going to be different. Then falls with quiet confidence, settling into something like calm hope, rather than loud certainty. Later that same morning, sitting outside the bakery with her coffee cooling beside her, Mira calls her mother to share the news that she's decided to stay in town a little longer. Her mother picks up, and right away you can hear the surprise jump into her voice. "You're staying? For how long?" Notice how quickly that question fires out, staying, rising sharply, almost breathless, and "for how long" following right behind it, without much pause at all, the two questions almost tumbling over each other. This rapid-fire questioning is very common when someone is genuinely excited and trying to gather information as fast as possible, their curiosity outrunning their patience for a slow, calm sentence. Mira laughs softly and says, "I don't know exactly, Mom. A few months, maybe. We'll see." The phrase, "we'll see," is interesting because it almost always falls gently, calmly, but with a small open quality to it, neither fully closed nor fully certain, the sound of someone comfortable leaving a question loosely unanswered rather than nailing it down completely. Try saying it yourself. "I don't know exactly. A few months, maybe. We'll see." Nice and relaxed, unhurried, comfortable with uncertainty rather than anxious about it. Her mother's voice softens then, the excitement settling into something warmer and quieter. "I'm glad, sweetheart. Really glad," she says. And that repeated, "glad," first plain, then stressed and stretched with "really" in front of it, shows a lovely, gentle build in emotional intensity. The second, "glad," carrying noticeably more weight and warmth than the first, like a feeling growing stronger the longer she sits with it. This kind of repetition with added stress, saying something once plainly and then again with more emphasis, is incredibly common in warm, sincere English speech, almost like the speaker is giving themselves a moment to feel the emotion more fully the second time around. Try saying that short exchange together. First, the mother's excited rush. "You're staying? For how long?" Quick, high, eager. Then Mira's relaxed, open answer. "I don't know exactly, Mom. A few months, maybe. We'll see." Calm, unhurried, comfortable. Then the warm, building repetition. "I'm glad, sweetheart. Really glad." With that second "glad" stretched just a little longer and warmer than the first. Notice how three completely different emotional textures, eager curiosity, relaxed openness, and warm building affection, all live inside this one short, simple phone call. And notice how none of these textures depend on difficult vocabulary at all. Every single word here is simple, easy, B1 level, plain and ordinary on paper. The entire emotional richness comes purely from the voice, which is exactly the point I've been making throughout this whole lesson, and exactly why this kind of listening practice matters so much more than memorizing longer and longer word lists. And that's where we'll leave Mira and Jordan for today, two old friends, reconnected, facing an uncertain but hopeful future together, exactly the kind of small, real, emotionally rich story where English intonation does so much invisible work underneath the surface of fairly simple words. Now, before you go, let's quickly gather everything together one more time, because repetition really is the secret ingredient in language learning, and a short, clear summary right at the end will help lock all of this into your memory far better than letting it scatter and fade. Rising intonation. The voice climbing upward usually signals real questions, especially yes or no questions, along with uncertainty, surprise, hope, or an open invitation for more information. Falling intonation. The voice dropping downward usually signals statements, confident decisions, certainty, comfort, and closure. Stress and emphasis, putting extra weight, length, or height on a particular word, shows you exactly which word in a sentence carries the real emotional center. the true point the speaker wants you to catch. And as we saw with that one small sentence about money, moving that stress around can completely rewrite the hidden meaning without changing a single word. Question tags like, "Isn't it?" or "Don't you?" can rise to ask something genuinely, or fall to simply invite friendly agreement. And learning to catch that small difference will sharpen your ear for countless everyday exchanges. Pace and rhythm matter just as much as pitch, with slower, heavier speech often showing sadness, seriousness, or careful thought, and faster, lighter speech often showing excitement, joy, or urgency, while tighter, sharper, quicker speech tends to signal frustration or mild anger pushing against something. Pauses are not empty silence. They are full of meaning, showing hesitation, emotional weight, or a speaker gathering their thoughts before continuing. Exactly like the little break before Mira admitted she might actually stay. And finally, the same exact words can carry completely opposite meanings, depending entirely on tone, which is why truly understanding spoken English requires listening far beyond the dictionary definitions of individual words, into the living, breathing music wrapped around them. I know that's a lot of patterns to hold in your mind all at once, so don't worry if it doesn't all feel automatic yet. Nobody listens perfectly after one single video, including people who've studied English for years. What matters is that you've now opened a door that was probably closed before today. And once a door like this opens, it tends to stay open. You'll find yourself, almost without trying, noticing these little rises and falls the next time you watch a show, listen to a podcast, or overhear a conversation between friends at a coffee shop. And each time you notice one, you're quietly training your ear a little more, building toward a day when all of this happens completely naturally, without any conscious effort at all. Give yourself permission to be a beginner at this kind of listening, even if your vocabulary is already fairly strong. Hearing emotion in a voice is its own separate skill, almost like learning to read music after already knowing how to read words on a page. And like any skill, it grows through patient, repeated, gentle practice rather than sudden, perfect understanding overnight. Be patient with yourself, the way you'd be patient with a good friend learning something new and a little difficult. If you practice noticing these patterns regularly, even just a little bit every day, I promise you, within a few weeks, you'll start catching things in real English conversations that used to slip right past you, jokes you used to miss, sincerity you used to doubt, sadness hiding behind brave words, excitement bubbling under calm sentences. This skill, more than almost any other single thing, is what separates someone who merely understands English words from someone who truly understands English people. Their feelings, their humor, their warmth, and their struggles, all carried invisibly inside the rise and fall of their voice. So here's what I want from you before you close this video. First, scroll back to at least 3 moments in this lesson and actually say them out loud again, right now, copying the tone as closely as you can, even if you feel a little silly doing it alone in your room. Nobody is watching, nobody is judging, and your mouth genuinely needs to feel these shapes, not just your brain understanding them in theory. Say the surprised, "Is that really you?" Say the playful, "Well, well, well." Say the flat, heavy, "It's been a hard year." And notice how differently each one feels in your chest, your throat, even your face. That physical memory is worth far more than any written rule I could give you. Second, if you genuinely enjoyed following Mira and Jordan's story today, and if this kind of real, emotional, conversation-based listening practice helped you more than dry grammar drills ever have, please hit that subscribe button, because we have so many more stories just like this one coming. Each one built around different emotions, different situations, and different intonation patterns for you to absorb naturally. Some upcoming lessons will take you into a tense job interview, a nervous first date, a worried phone call late at night, and a joyful family reunion at an airport, each one carrying its own unique emotional fingerprint for you to discover and copy. Third, drop a comment below and tell me which line from today's story you found hardest to copy, or which emotional tone surprised you the most when we broke it apart. Was it the sharp, defensive, "I can handle my own business," or the soft, trailing, "not really," at the end of Mira's decision to stay? Maybe it was the 5 different hidden meanings hiding inside one simple sentence about money. Whatever it was, tell me, because I read every single comment, and your questions genuinely shape what we cover in future lessons here on English in Fluency. Fourth, if you have a moment, try recording your own voice saying just one of today's lines, then play it back and compare it honestly to how I said it in this video. Don't worry about sounding perfect. Worry about sounding alive, with real rises and falls, real stretching on emotional words, real pauses where a real person would naturally pause. That living quality matters far more than a flawless accent ever could. And finally, if you know a friend, a classmate, or a co-worker who's been stuck at that frustrating stage where they understand words but still feel lost in real conversations, send this video their way, because honestly, sharing this kind of practical human approach to listening is one of the kindest things you can do for someone working hard on their English journey. Learning a language can feel lonely sometimes, and a small nudge from a friend, a single shared video, can make a bigger difference than we often realize. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I'm Alex. This has been English in Fluency, and I will see you in the very next lesson, where another story, another set of voices, and another layer of English emotion will be waiting for you to discover. One rise and fall at a time, one quiet pause at a time, one honest human sound at a time.